Hi, everybody. My name is Diana Dina, Head of Sustainability and Regenerative Design at Howard Tompkins. Welcome to the session of Repurposing Land and Buildings, part of the NAWIC London and Southeast Conference 2020. The event acknowledges the current climate and biodiversity crisis we face as an industry, and various movements, including Architects Declare movement launched last year, for instance, followed by Project Managers Declare movement, Landscape Architects and Engineers Declare. They've all raised the question about the importance of adaptation and retrofitting. Our guest speakers tonight will be introduced by the chair for the event, Hattie Harman, journalist and architect at AJ Sustainability Editor, who will go into a bit more detail about tonight's topic. The session is being recorded, so please share any questions in the chat box and Hattie will pick them. Hattie?
Thank you very much. So let's see here, share screen. Is everybody seeing my screen?
Yep.
Great. Now, I just have to see how to advance.
Probably just by clicking.
Great. Okay, I got it. So thank you very much for inviting me tonight. I am absolutely delighted to have a chance to talk to a cross-disciplinary audience, because every project that I've seen in the decade or so that I've been covering this topic of sustainable design, it's the cross-disciplinary teams that are leading the way with the most pioneering projects. And I just think the more we understand how each other works, the more we work together, the better the projects are. And for years, I gave a talk called Mainstreaming Green Design. Obviously, with everything that's taken place last year, we're all focused on the next decade and climate emergency. Couple of quick things that I'm working on at the moment that may be of interest. I'm about to launch a podcast with the AJ called Climate Champions. And I think our first speaker would be, actually, there are several women we're doing an episode of 6 series, 4 are women, possibly 5. So, and very cross-disciplinary. I think this is really part of the answer, and it will be going live next month. So I'll be sharing on social media. And I've also spent a lot of time during lockdown finishing up this book on the right, which is coming from RIBA Publishing in the spring. The real expert on this topic is one of my co-authors, Judith Kempian. She knows everything about building performance. And I've learned a huge amount by doing this project. And actually, this book was due really a couple of years ago. And for a variety of reasons, it's all taken longer. And I think it's a better book and more timely. So I hope you'll look out for it. I'm going to speak very briefly. I want to mention to you Architects Declare. I'm sure some of you are aware of it. I want to talk to you about a campaign we've been running at the Architects Journal. I want to talk a little bit briefly about landscape. I think landscape is something we all need to be more tuned into. I'm delighted with the title of this talk called Repurposing Land, Buildings and Land. The land bit we don't hear enough about. I mean, possibly Harriet does, but I don't think in the industry in general we do. Then I'm going to show you a few exemplars, projects I've seen which I think are interesting that we can learn from, and end on what can we do, what can you do? Now, I don't know, whoops, what did I do? I don't know how many of you are familiar with Architects Declare. This is an initiative that was launched in May of last year by 17 leading architectural practices that have been Sterling Prize winners. Quite incredible that practices that are normally competitors got together behind this declaration. And what I really like about it is that it's climate and biodiversity emergency. It's really looking at the environmental side of this in the broad holistic sense. And I took this screen grab this morning, over 1,000 signatories. It's really incredible. There's a lot of work to be done because there are practices who've signed up who really know what they're doing, who are leading the way. There are many practices who are on this journey, and there are many others who don't know where to start. And we all need to move this agenda forward as quickly as we can. At the AJ, one of my colleagues, Will Hurst, really is the mastermind behind this campaign, which I think is so well thought out. And I think it's really helped put this issue front and center in the mind of the profession, that we have to look at retro first. And he's now taking this to Parliament. He's an intrepid investigative journalist. He's the one who torpedoed the Garden Bridge. And I think you're going to be hearing more about this. We're always looking for backers. I think we have over 200 signatories at the moment, but you can find out more about it on our website. So what can we all do? I think we can all pay more attention to landscape, which is, as I mentioned before, that's why I've put Harriet up first. This is a column I wrote, I think a year or two ago, which got a lot of shares, particularly from landscape architects on social media. And I think that this was really brought to my attention when I went to see one of Kevin MacLeod's early projects in Swindon called the Triangle, which is some affordable housing by Glenn Howell's architects. And he works very closely with the landscape architect on every project. In fact, the landscape architect works the site first to figure out where the key moves need to be before they think about where they're going to put the buildings. And I think this is what we all need to be really cued into. And it is sometimes hard to get a client to hire landscape expertise early in a project, just as hard as it is to get the structural engineer and the services engineer in early. And this is what I would be interested to hear more from the audience about during the Q&A. So a few projects. These are, I can't say these are my all-time favorites. These are just a few that I thought I would show you. A really good source for looking at retrofit projects is to look at the AJ Retrofit Awards, which we've been running, I think almost, I don't know, maybe 7 or 8 years now. When we started it, nobody really thought retrofit was such a hot idea for awards. Now we are flooded with interesting projects, and they're all on our website, and we get more and more interesting projects as the years go on. This is a project which some of you may know, right near Euston, north of Warren Street, north of the Marylebone Road, but for British land. And what's really interesting about this is the circular economy aspect. This is, I believe, a 1990s building, which was also by Arup Associates at the time, the architectural wing of Arup. And when they went to look at how to retrofit this building, they figured out that the facade was actually a very high quality facade from Germany. And they figured out that they could dismantle this facade. And the plan was to send it back to Germany to I don't know, have the gaskets and bits and bobs renewed and bring it back again. And then they figured out that it was more cost effective to set up a pop-up plant in Basildon, which is what they did. And the whole facade was disassembled and reassembled and has been put back up. Now, you can say this was easy to do because it was a good building in the first place. The floor-to-floor heights, et cetera, made this all possible. It was a good facade. So many buildings have potential, and we just go in and demolish them. So I think this is a project that we can all learn from, that is worth really exploring. And, you know, interestingly, this is completing now. It's on site. It may be even complete, but when this was conceived and designed 6 or 8 years ago, some people were talking about circular economy, but not to the extent that we are now. And they've actually done it here. So this is one to look at. I was curious, maybe some of you can answer in the chat, how many of you have come across ACAN, the Architects Climate Action Network? This is a group of architects that got together post the Extinction Rebellion demonstrations on Westminster Bridge last year. And they now have over 1,000 members. They're very active. They have different work streams. They're very active on the circular economy. And this in the middle here is their logo. You can find them on Instagram and social media, and they're doing a lot of good work. You can join up. It's very, very transparent, active organization. One of the work streams that I've been involved with is the education group. They're very hot on the topic of curricular reform in architecture schools, and they meet weekly and they get a lot done very quickly through WhatsApp groups and Google Docs, and very light-footed way of working. Now this is a building that I came across because it was submitted to the Retrofit Awards a couple of years ago, and it is in East London in Poplar, and it was again a sort of late 20th century underloved office building. And this is the new atrium, and all done with CLT. And that on the left is the old atrium. And this is what it looks like on the right. Now, you know, I've spent about 10 years looking at buildings and trying to figure out how sustainable are they really. It's a very, very tricky question. Every time it's a tricky question. And I went to try to find out about the mechanical plant. I don't know if there's anyone here on the call who knows details about this project, but I really tried hard to find out about the mechanical plant and what was done to update the mechanical plant, and whether they explored any kind of mixed mode ventilation, because it's a sealed building. And I really couldn't get many answers. So these things are very tricky. Lots of CLT, a beautiful design, but you have to be on every single aspect of this to really address climate emergency. This is another building that came through the AJ Retrofit Awards. This is a Thistleton building where they added a roof extension. The whole street frontage was redone. There's also a rear extension in CLT. And again, an underloved, I think, 1960s building, repurposed to house 25 charities, with both communal space shared by the 25 charities and community space open to the neighborhood. This is a project that was on Dist last week. I haven't seen this. We can't go anywhere at the moment, but it's a beautiful train station that has been repurposed with these, apparently there are 12 of these CLT pavilions, which are retail within this shed structure. And you can see a lot more details about it on Dist. I think we need to look abroad more, where sometimes I feel, at least, that I'm in an echo chamber. I know, have a pretty good sense of the UK landscape, but there's a lot of innovation going on. We need to look at the best projects everywhere. Now, this is an example in Fitzrovia. This is just to say they don't all have to be beautiful train stations. They're just simple unloved buildings like this one here on the right that can be also rethought, brought up to date without tearing them down. And this is a case where this render was taken off the facade, and the existing bricks the pointing was redone, and they were, I think, a kind of mineral paint was used to give this finish of the finished building. And this is the inside. Not every client would want to work in this space, but basically they looked for features that they could keep, exposed surfaces, and a very thoughtfully and carefully detailed stair that gives a sense of openness to the whole space. That's a detail of the stair. So it's about the big moves. It's also about the small moves. And I'm sure many of you have seen this project, and Marion, one of our panelists, probably knows a lot more about this project than I do. I haven't actually been to see it, but this is a Dutch approach to housing retrofit, where a whole terrace was done by Studio Partington. And the residents remained in situ while this was done. And it's quite an incredible achievement. I don't know if there are plans to do more of this in the UK. Maybe someone else knows more about this than I do. Here's on the left what it looked like before. I'm not convinced by this pink and purple, but it has given the place an identity. Lots that can be done with one-off terraced houses. This is something else we published in the AJ a couple of years ago. This is quite an unusual project. It's that upper left is what it looked like before. And this is the rear extension and basically a house built around a house. So there are many, many approaches to this. There are so many resources out there. I haven't begun to list them. I hope everyone on this call knows the work of LETI, the London Energy Transformation Initiative, and the design guide that's downloadable for free on their website. I think it's been downloaded 15,000 times or more. And I can put it in the chat box if and these are a couple of, well, the book on the left by Duncan Dacre Brown in Brighton is 3 years old. I hope most of you have seen that one. This is a recent Swiss book on the same topic. And then I put this project on as a bit of a provocation that we all need to really think about out of the box. This is by BBUK in Copenhagen, where they've put a ski slope and a landscaped walking path on top of a waste to energy plant. And I have to say, I was highly skeptical of this whole concept and thought it was just kind of a gimmick. And I did go to the press opening, and it's early days, so it's too soon to say, but this is more about the repurposing of land and how to draw people and how to redevelop an industrial site. I mean, this was a kind of industrial part of the harbor that was kind of had some very, a few activities of this nature, like I think you could go kayaking or maybe jet skiing or some of these types of things. And it gave them the idea to make this a sporting venue. We'll see if it works, but I think we need to really be thinking outside the box. And here it is. Fantastic view from the top. And this is a landscape path, so you can do it just as a walk. You don't have to do the skiing bit. Another thing we need to do is revisit our projects and learn from what works and what doesn't work. And this doesn't happen often enough. The RIBA has recently put a big challenge out for post-occupancy. And the book that I've done with Sophie and Judith talks a lot about that. This is a revisit we did to a Hopkins project in Woking. If we ever get out of this crazy pandemic, I really urge you to go see this project. If you haven't seen it, it's open to the public. There's a visitor center at the front. And I thought this was particularly appropriate in terms of putting the revisit message across, but also because of repurposing land. This is built over a municipal car park, this project. And here you can see below is the car park and above is this 2-story new office. And it's absolutely wonderful inside because you're at the level of the tree canopy when you're inside. Okay, they have these 2 huge ficus which have survived, but when you're in these offices, you're looking out in the tree canopy, and it's just fantastic. But I love this notion of building over the car park. And this is what it looks like. I think it was 5 years in. We went back, we talked to people who work there. We talked to the architects. We looked at the energy. It's actually performing very, very well. Their carbon footprint due to flights, because their staff travel so much, was actually higher than the building emissions, operational emissions, which I found really fascinating. Now, here, many of these things will be so familiar, but you know, on every project, you need someone championing this, or else these things get lost along the way. And every single project, we just have to challenge the client with the brief. We have to examine what are the opportunities for retrofit. Can a demolition audit be done? What can be salvaged if the building itself can't be salvaged? Use passive design to design out the operational energy loads to the absolute maximum, and also look at embodied carbon. We need to be looking at whole life carbon. Look at exemplars, look at relevant projects, think outside the box, as I said, and revisit, and then share what works and what doesn't work. So those are my thoughts. I'm now going to turn this over to our first speaker. I'm really delighted. We have a landscape architect, we have a project manager, we have a building service engineer. I've spent my life, it feels like the last 10 years, talking to building service engineers. And we have an architect, Marion, whom I've known since I got started with this. She's ahead of me on this agenda. We don't have a structural engineer, unfortunately. They're very much front and center now with embodied carbon coming much more on everyone's radar. Harriet she founded her own practice, I think it was 2002, BBUK, landscape architecture. She has a team of 12. Many of you will know one of the projects she was recently responsible for, which is Goldsmith Street in Norwich, which won the Sterling Prize, social housing project for Norwich County Council. And it's a very, I had a quick peek at your PDF of your presentation. I don't think you're going to talk about Goldsmith Street, but I did have some questions about it because it's a very brave landscape approach, which has communal gardens behind the terraced houses that are shared. And I really wonder how that's going down, and during the pandemic with all that wonderful weather we had in the spring, if that's been a success. So I hope you will get to ask your questions about that. So over to Harriet now.
Hi.
I have to unshare, yes, stop share.
And then I'll share mine. No, I'm not talking about Goldsmith Street because it was, I suppose it was reused, that land, in that there was sheltered accommodation there, but by the time we got appointed, it had all been demolished, and it had actually been demolished for about 7 years by the time the team really started thinking about it. So I am talking about two projects about 2 miles apart from each other that are, I felt, were quite a nice kind of contrast to the kind of work we do, which is a bit of everything really. So we're starting off in the City of London, in King William Street, and then I was going to talk about some housing that we're doing for London Borough of Hackney, up just next to Shoreditch Park, literally 2 miles north of King William Street, which is where we're going to start. So it's a site almost bang opposite the Bank of England, so right in the heart of the City of London, the financial area, lots of money, lots of slick offices, lots of suited men, and some women too. But it's a fairly traditional area. This is a very traditional Victorian building that we went to look at with AHMM. It was a roof garden. I think it's slightly the wrong way around. So looking, so from the roof, you could see iconic building. I mean, amazingly, because it's only about 5 stories high. You can see some kind of a lot of the London's really iconic buildings, from St Paul's through to the Shard, through to the Barbican. Fantastic views, but when we went to look at it, the whole of the area was covered in plant, so that you could literally just get around on a kind of a gangway around the building to look out to the views. So the concept for the space was to create a square in the sky, which from where the views could be enjoyed, the square would be enclosed with benches, and then there would be planting around the outside of the around the edges in order to enhance the ecology of the site, and also to frame some of these views out. As I said, the front bit of the building was being retained. Maybe I didn't say it. Sorry, the front bit of the building was being retained. The back half of the building was being demolished. So it was a kind of half reuse, half rebuild. But when we went to site for the first time, we were really struck by all this wonderful York Portland stone that was facing the existing building. So we did a survey of what was there. We looked at the dimensions of the stone that was there. We worked out the square meterage of what was going to be coming down from the demolished building, and we proposed that this would be used as paving and cladding around the outside of the new roof garden, in order to reuse some of the materials that would otherwise be going to landfill. So when we looked at the different widths, there were 3 principal widths of stone. So therefore, we set out a paving pattern that would accommodate those widths with a kind of random length, so that we could so that wastage could be accommodated. We then returned, so the paving would run along the floor and then return up the cladding, so that you've got these kind of lines of different widths of paving and cladding going around the terrace. So this was the general arrangement drawing, showing the setting out of the paving, which then ran parallel to the building, but then we also accommodated the slightly weird angle kind of prow of the building, which went out onto King William Street facing the Bank of England. We were retaining this lovely, it's not really a cupola because it doesn't let light through, but this little odd little building which could be used for storing stuff. When we designed this space, we didn't know who was going to be in the building. We knew it was going to be an office, but we didn't know whether there was going to be one tenant that was going to take the whole building, or whether it was going to be floor by floor. So we wanted to design a very flexible space, but we knew it was almost certainly going to be used for kind of client entertaining, for staff to go out at lunchtime and have a drink, or have their not have a drink at lunchtime, I hope, have their lunch and perhaps have drinks in the evenings. So we also designed so the seating around the outside would be a retained flower bed, and then seating so you could either perch on the stone or have a more comfortable timber bench. We then had higher areas which were almost like a bar area, so where you could lean on these areas, but also that was the parapet for the planting. So then the finished roof garden looked like this, with the stone running across, and then running up the side, 450, 500 high, which also was the planting bed, and then these higher, what we call bar areas. So a small detail of the seating, of the paving and the cladding for the balustrade, the little building on the site, and then looking out back towards the main kind of lift lobby and core of the building, which opened out onto this with the shard lit up in the background. And then by contrast, we were appointed, actually it was a mini competition with Mikhail Riches, who were the architects at Goldsmith Street. We were appointed, we did a competition for some infill housing for London Borough of Hackney. We were appointed to do 2 sites. This is one of them, Wimborne Street, which is opposite Shoreditch Park. So a lot of open space, but with the barrier of the New North Road between them. The site actually was originally just these garages here, and then they extended it to garages over the other side of the road. So this cutout here is Wimborne House, which is a very nice kind of Victorian warehouse building. So we were building on, Michael Richards were building on the garages there. So this is what was on the site initially, a really very miserable play area surrounded by asphalt, quite a lot of car parking, and then this kind of really unfriendly hazard paving to stop the cars straying into the wrong places, more garages, quite a lot of railings to stop you going where you really want to go. So the most direct routes were closed off with railings and grass and low retaining wall, not retaining walls, low walls. So this was the site boundary. On the left is the site boundary when we were first given the project. So the first meeting we had with the client, we said to them, we can't just look at this area here and do a little bit of landscape for the new residents. These guys here are losing their car parking. We're going to need to provide new play anyway. So we persuaded Hackney to extend the site to include the area around the existing tower and to include all the car parking and the rather miserable play area that I showed you earlier, so that we could actually do something a little bit more extensive. So the existing site plan, we have play area, car parking, sandwiching in concrete asphalt play area, storerooms and garages, and then actually quite a generous piece of open land, but it's all amenity grassland. It was all enclosed in 1.5 meter high railings, so it was impossible to get to. And then some quite nice mature trees on the site. So the site plan, I put this in because I thought it's important to look at the trees. We had to take out one of the really nice mature, there was a very nice mature lime tree, and there just was no way to keep it. We did try every which way, but there was just impossible with the root protection area to keep that tree. So there was a hornbeam as well. So that was retained. We replaced the lime with 2 more lime trees that now run up New North Road. So actually there's there's a line of trees that go from pretty well the Old Street roundabout all the way up the road and along Shoreditch Park. So we took the opportunity of kind of beefing up that single-sided avenue along the left-hand side of the road as you're traveling north. We moved the car park from here because we left the car park here. We moved the play area much further north so that none of the buildings would overshadow it. So it meant that the play area actually is getting sunlight pretty well all day. We've put new trees in. We have added suds into the edges of the play area and suds features, so the car park can drain into the play. We have put in what we're referring to as older people's play, so more kind of fitness equipment and play that's geared towards teenagers. So looking at trying to accommodate something within the landscape that kind of 2 to 90-year-olds can use to encourage people into the area, and to encourage overlooking so it doesn't get overtaken by teens, which some people find kind of threatening. We then this area was added to the brief slightly later for more housing. So here it was just a very simple.
You've got about a minute left.
I'm very nearly finished. Very nearly finished.
Yeah.
So creating again, we took the boundary right up to the edge of these existing flats here, put in new tree planting, reconfigured the ramp because there was a steps and a very difficult accessible access into these flats. And then another key move was opening up this area here so that actually residents from the blocks here, the existing blocks and the new block, can get straight out to the New North Road to get to the bus stops and then walk down to Old Street if they need to go to the tube. This got planning about 4 weeks ago. I think there was a unanimous vote by the planning committee at Hackney. And we are hoping that will get on site sometime next year. So illustrative view, illustrative sections, view of the play area, and I'm finished. So I will
Thank you very, very, very much.
stop sharing.
So next up, we have Helen Crawford. Helen is a project manager, and I'm delighted we've got a project manager here on the panel. She's a project manager with Avison Young with over 25 years of experience delivering large, I think primarily retail, but also commercial and mixed use projects, not only in the UK, but in the Middle East. So Helen, over to you.
Thank you very much, Hattie, and thank you to Harriet. That was very interesting. And the project actually I'm going to show you now is not far from your King William Street. It's also in the City of London. So I'll crack on because I know we've got some limited time. The project I'm talking about is 55 Barts Close. Our client, Helical, has done a lot of refurbishment and regeneration within the area. The project is located in the Smithfield Market Conservation Area. So you can see from the plan there, it's very much surrounded by residential, small office blocks, as well as the high-rise, more modern ones as part of the redevelopment. And we also actually worked on the adjacent project next door on 1 Bartholomew Close. So we have a lot of background, not only working with Helical, but also we know the area very well. You may know us as Second London Wall. We were purchased by Avison Young and rebranded as Avison Young Project Management. But the company has been very much working in the City of London and very experienced in working not only with the modern high-rise, but also with refurbishing the buildings such as Barts, 55 Barts Close. The building was originally, it's mid-Victorian and was originally terraced houses over 5 levels with a basement, a single-story basement below. And in recent times, when we were trying to draw up the contract particulars and the employer's requirements and basically go through the tender process, the actual building was being used as the welfare offices for the contractor for the building, which you can just see in the picture here, just to the left, the redevelopment at Bartholomew Close. So that's essentially where the building's located, and we had quite a tight time frame set by Helical. We were the project managers and employees agents. QOB was selected after quite a compact tender process. The architects, Maurice Smith, had been involved in the project for quite some time because the project had actually started quite a few years ago and then stopped. And then obviously things changed, and then it was used for welfare. And then the job basically gathered momentum at the start of 2018 again. And we were required to get on site and get the construction underway by the end of 2018. The building services engineers for Sweco, and they also covered the BRIAM consultancy work for us as well. And the structural engineers, which when I show you the next few slides will register to you how important they were, because there was an awful lot of work to be done to not only refurbish the existing timber in the building, but also the steel that had been added over the years in the sort of the early 20th century. But we also had to add additional steel as well. I've just lifted off a few indicative floor plans just so that you can sort of see roughly the layout. So the frontage is on Barts Close is along here, and then to the right, which goes down to an alleyway, which takes you to, just thinking it's not Farringdon Station, it's the other one. There's Farringdon Station to your left, Smithfield Market more or less in this area, and a lot of residential property, which is bit of new and a bit of old, but very much premium pricing. I think 1-bedroom apartments are in the plus 1 million mark. You know, obviously by the nature of the location, it was a sensitive area to carry out the works that we had to do for that. The actual project was to remove the roof and add a 5th floor to it. So we added a 5th floor space. We also extended the basement area out the back and then put a glass sort of, I wouldn't want to call it a conservatory, but we essentially popped out and added a glass roof on the ground floor just to create some more daylight for the ground floor space. We also dropped down the windows. They were some rather ugly PVC windows along the Bart's close front elevation, and we replaced those and dropped the street scene down so that potentially it could also work for retail if that was appropriate. We also revised the 4th floor layout and created a new lobby to improve the escape stairs. So originally there was one escape staircase, and we improved the second staircase, which also doubled up as access to the cycle area in the basement. We did a lot of stripping out. Essentially, we ripped out pretty much everything, but retained as many of the timber beams that you can see in the bottom right-hand image. We stripped all the services out. We upgraded all the windows that you can see. And obviously, when we added the 5th floor, we added windows that were in keeping, and also agreed with planners what they would look like. We used low iron double glazing for the extension on the glass roof to create the additional light that was essential for that space. We cleaned all the brick inside and out. There are some piers that you'll see in the finished product which needed refurbishment. Some of it we couldn't retain. They'd been patched over the years and repointed. We found lime that had been used over the years. So there was quite a lot of work to try and retain as much as of the existing building that we could, at the same time as opening it up. On the roof, there was some existing metal balustrading on the roof terrace, which was replaced with a painted mild steel on the new extension. We added an additional terraced area as well. There was a smaller one, and we tidied it up and basically gave it a nice external space on both the 4th floor and also the 5th floor level as well. We used timber decking and planting to create a relaxing open space. So that's sort of in a nutshell what the overall project overview was and the task that we had set out. The overall area, it's over 7 floors, and it's approximately 11,000 square feet for the end product. We had 2 main contracts. We had a 6-week strip out contract, which basically was to take all the welfare officers from the previous contractor, remove all the services. Obviously, an asbestos survey was carried out prior to that, and all the asbestos that was present was removed. And then the main works contract, which was approximately 53 weeks, with a completion date on the 3rd of December 2019. The overall value of the main works contract was 4 million. So, you know, a lot of time and effort was, you know, put into this project to keep the essence and keep it in keeping with its surrounds. The images that you can see in here are obviously just to give you an idea of the scale of the building. I'm hoping you can see these on here, but anyway, we'll be providing you with a printout of them. Let's see if I can zoom in. That's probably better. One of the things that we had to do was obviously to carry out a timber and also a steel survey in the beginning. This was quite difficult while the welfare officers were still operating. We've had a very tight time scale to go back in there and carry out the brick, timber and steel surveys. So when we went to contract, there was actually, we knew as much as we could know to go into contract, but unfortunately, when we started stripping things out, we found that things were not as they seemed. So we had to get the structural engineers to do some quick changes with some of the designs of the steels. And we did find that we had to add some more in. The bottom right-hand corner, as you can see, is the steels to support the new roof. The middle picture down here is the extension to the ground floor, where we created a nice glazed section for the ground floor area, so that we could have some daylight coming into it, creating a much nicer space for the modern office. And now that I've expanded it, hold on a second, there we go. That's it. As you can probably imagine, with a project of this size, especially with the time period that we had, plus we didn't have an empty building to survey when we were drawing up all the contract particulars, it was difficult for us to know everything from the start. But we had an excellent relationship with the client, who understood the nature of the beast that we were working with. So some of the challenges, asbestos removal, as you could imagine, with an old building, it's important to remove all the asbestos.
Got about a minute, Helen.
Okay, thanks. After the, we did discover when we were lifting some floors that there was a little bit more that needed to be removed, so that had to be done. We also had acoustic requirements for the new plant on the roof that needed to be dealt with. The close proximity of the neighbours, third-party wall agreements were very important. Fortunately, Helical owned the building to one side, so that was relatively straightforward, although there's obviously different owners. We also set ourselves a target of achieving BREEAM excellent status for the refurbishment project under the 2014 timeframe. Fortunately, we were successful in achieving that. We also suffered water ingress from neighbouring water leaks. And as I mentioned before, the site location and the access, the restrictive hours, also neighbouring tenancies. The minute something happened, naturally, if you've paid £1.5 million for a one-bedroom flat, you're going to get on the phone to the City of London. So just to finish off, just the outcomes. There's some images here. We've got a Cat A refurbished building. It retains its lovely, unique character. We've kept some exposed brickwork, retained the steel beams and the sash windows, giving a historical context to these modern and efficient interiors. The additional floor space has obviously added value altogether and made the amenity and the office space more attractive. We also added WCs and kitchenettes on each floor. We didn't know if there'd be one tenant for this building or multi-tenants. As it's turned out, we have let the 5th floor, which is where you see this attractive bifold door arrangement, and also the basement and the ground floor has been leased more recently as well. And we've just sent our application in for BREEAM excellent status with a point score of 72%, and the EPC rating for the building is a B rating. And that is pretty much just flicking through some pictures here. You can see the bifold doors in the middle here, and this is the end product on the right hand side where we've managed to retain, and you can see the drop down large windows on the street side with the ground floor tenant, which gives an attractive office space, and that space has just recently been let, so we're very pleased about that, as obviously our client is. So thank you. That's me. I'll stop share now. And I think this is over to Kavita now.
Thank you very, very much, Helen. Yes, we're over to Kavita Kumari, who is a mechanical engineer, building services engineer with Kundal, and she is passionate about sustainability. She is a lead GRIAM and WELL AP, as well as a FitWell ambassador. And Kavita, correct me if I'm wrong, I think you were responsible for delivering Kundal's WELL Gold standard office at
yes, I was
at One Carter Lane. So I also saw that you've done a huge amount on data centers. I wonder if they're going to have to be refurbished one of these days. Over to you.
Great. Well, good evening all. Hope you can see my screen. That's okay. So good evening and welcome to the conference today. And thank you to Hattie, Harriet, and Helen for the great insights into the work they've been doing so far. It's been very inspiring. Again, I've got one case study which I will touch on. It's One Headed Street, which is based just off Regent Street in the West End. This is the Crown Estate's co-working flagship building. And I'm going to touch on how they have embedded examples of retrofitting and highlighting sustainability as well, health and well-being within the design principles and applying this within the spaces. So moving on to the next slides, I think what I wanted to sort of highlight as well, as we progress through the current pandemic, we must not forget about the impact we and buildings have on the environment. And how we deal with that is based on the climate emergency we are facing, and I'll give you some guidance on how we mitigate that. So here's a diagram which is quite simply put together. I'm not going to read you line by line, but basically the 6 elements that you need to consider when retrofitting an existing building or a space. Number 1 is future proofing. The most sustainable approach you can look at when designing a space is to future proof it. This will then enable you to adapt. If you look at item 6 there, to adapt according to how the space evolves and creates that longevity and resilience within your design. The item number 2 and number 3 looks at modern construction practices, where you can reuse as much as possible. You reduce the embodied carbon impact on a building, but also it reduces the waste which is generated from construction activities as well as post-construction activities. You're looking at modern methods of construction, and most big developers and contractors nowadays are familiar with this sort of processes which can be applied. Again, we touched on adapting and future-proofing, creating flexible fit-out spaces. Gives you that flexibility of between 30 to 40 fit-out cycles, and gives the incoming tenants that flexibility to fit out the space accordingly with least amount of wastage and construction activities. And the last thing, which is sort of trending at the minute, is prop tech. Including prop tech into design is something which a lot of people are looking at the minute to enhance efficiency. We talk about construction efficiency, building materials efficiency, but also monitoring the outcome of these initiatives and any processes. Here I've sort of highlighted a list of two sets of lists, the quick wins and the key considerations. Most of this have been included within the One Headed Street development. I'm not going to read them line by line, so I'll just let you sort of have a look at this for a couple of seconds. One of the other topical subjects I wanted to sort of highlight as well, as we progress through this pandemic, a topical subject we'll touch on is the trend towards health and well-being in a post-pandemic world. I mean, I'm not sure about you, but I'm finding it's becoming quite relevant as businesses are using this opportunity to repurpose, adapt, and pandemic-proof their workspaces. I've been speaking to a few occupiers, and I found that although everyone was initially quite excited about working from home, but I think that's starting to wane off a little bit. A few organizations have carried out working from home surveys, and I think what we're seeing is staff still have a very strong connection from their workplace. I suppose some of this is habitual as well. It creates that routine, day-to-day activities. Some of the findings in the surveys, it indicates a number of factors why people are missing the offices. Perhaps it's the lack of suitable workplace set up at home, lack of human interaction outside your personal circle of friends or family. But also one of the top things on the list was unable to switch off at the end of the day and sort of put work away and start your evening time and your rest time. The surveys also indicated that staff or occupiers wanted to return to a flexible, more agile workspace, also, with sophisticated prop tech technology incorporated within the spaces. They also sort of, the surveys also touched on, creating that human factor in design to create a sense of a space which creates a sense of empowerment and a cohesive communal space. This is not a new finding. In recent times, you can see that this is a graph from UK GBC. It shows the number of times Google searches have been done for the word health and well-being in recent years. As we all know, health and well-being is increasingly becoming important in a modern workplace design. If you look at the graph, it looks at the four main regions in the UK, and surprisingly, the big proportion is within Scotland. Not sure whether that's a positive or because we still have quite a lot of work to do. And here it is, One Haddon Street. So as you can see there, I sort of touched on a few examples of what has been incorporated in the slides before in terms of the quick win, the key considerations. One Haddon Street has been designed and fitted with future-proofing and adaptability in mind, using some of the examples I gave before. Also, this building has been pandemic-proof with suitable measures in place from day one. They've gone beyond government sort of guidance to make sure that it creates a nice space and a resourceful space for anyone who wants to come and work in there whilst feeling secure. The space is connected and creates a sense of cohesive community within the buildings. And some of the amenities which the members are given include, supporting them whilst they're in the office and also while they're working outside this workspace. Some examples that they've put together during this period includes online cookery classes, healthy eating, daily exercise and yoga spaces, and also giving the opportunity to network online with fellow members, as they call them. There's a lot of emphasis at the minute in industry to create workspaces where they're trying to get staff to come back into their places. The emphasis on hospitality to create more memorable moments and experiences when in the workplace or even away. One of the other things I want to sort of touch on as well, speaking on this and as well to my organization as well as other occupiers, we are finding that employees want to come back to a more restorative space. This can be, having wellness spaces, for example, yoga spaces or meditation rooms, having private quiet spaces, a prayer room or even a mothering room to support new mothers, a sports room, any game rooms, or even just quiet spaces where you can do softer fitness activities, and also outdoor and nature-inspired spaces, having rooftop and roof garden. One of the other spaces which people want when they eventually do come back to the workspace is creating more community spaces. I think the pandemic has resulted in lots of voids in different communities, and staff want to come back and reconnect with the organization and employees within the organizations or even their team members. Also looking at creating spaces where you can have sort of a hotel lounge or sort of a downtime cafe is something which is encouraged, as well as outdoor spaces, which I mentioned earlier. Talking about prop tech, what I sort of wanted to touch on as well, we're finding that lots of occupiers and employees want to understand what's happening in the space. I think having a standard environmental quality sort of set up with sensors which tell you what's happening with the spaces gives the occupant the understanding of what's happening in their workspaces, as well as having this shown on a monitor gives them that reassurance the reassurance that the space is being monitored and not detrimental to their health. And here's an example of a monitor, which we've used on a couple of projects. This is just a graphic image of it. This is also beneficial to asset managers and landlords to display their well-being credentials and use it as a marketing collateral. And last but not least, if you don't know where to start, then the well building standard or even the health safety rating is a big driver of creating healthy and sustainable spaces. So have a look at that, and if you've got any questions afterwards, we can pick up a question in the question answer session. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Kavita. That's super interesting.
No problem.
We'll hear more from you during the Q&A.
Great.
Our last speaker is Marion Bailey, whom I have come across over the years consistently. She's really been leading this agenda. She trained as a passive house designer, I think long before most people had ever heard of passive house in the UK. She is a partner at PDP London, where she has designed many large-scale complex projects. So taking her sustainability expertise into the mainstream to more mainstream clients. And she has also delivered a passive house retrofit project of a Victorian terraced house in Notting Hill in a conservation area, completed in 2011. And then she's written a book about retrofit. So she really has been on this. And I happened to see on Twitter that you live in an Enerfit house and that your boiler broke last week, but the house has stayed very comfortable. So you'll have to tell us a bit more about that when you're not working on Chelsea Barracks and these other enormous projects. So over to you, Marion.
Thank you very much, Hattie. So yes, I would like to thank you for being here today, and hopefully the aim of this presentation is to inspire you to reinvent, repurpose, and remake our architecture. So just a quick intro, because I think we are all very, I suppose, modest in our career and our, the challenges that being a woman in construction industry can be. So I've just put a couple of bullet points about my journey, which is really the key point in my career so far, I would say, is really to have retrained, to acknowledge my shortcoming on my knowledge, and gone back to university halfway through my current experience, I suppose, and accepted that I needed to start from scratch and learn about sustainability, because nobody had really taught us at university in my days anyway. So that was a really extremely important move in my career, which made me find out about passive house, and that has after that transformed the way that I saw buildings, and it really inspired me. So first, a couple of words on the big picture, because that's really what's really important. So the big picture is that, most of the buildings that will be in the UK in 2050, which is the absolute limit by which we need to be net zero carbon in the UK, legally binding Act of Parliament, are already here. So we need to look after them and make sure that they are as net zero carbon that is really the main aspect. We renew about 1% of our stock, so new build is important, but is not as important as addressing our existing stock, which is also responsible for 38% of the total UK CO2 emission, all industries accounted. So, so building and use is a major climate change challenge in the UK. And residential building is about 28% in the proportion of CO2 emission. So very important to address. And I suppose, yeah, the key for this is to acknowledge also the fact that we have the oldest housing stock in the whole of Europe. So we have a particular problem to address here. And we also have a historic stock with a lot of character and with a lot of lovely features that perhaps there is less of in the core stock of the continent housing stock. So, so we need to understand that it's despite its cultural and aesthetic value, it's also very inefficient, it's solid wall, it's uncomfortable, it contributes to climate change because it uses about 83% of the houses in the UK are using gas for central heating. It's very expensive to run and it can also affect people's health. So the cost to the NHS of treating illnesses related to poor housing condition is about £26 million a week. So if we were proactive rather than reactive, we could also be a bit more clever with our building and our NHS. So as I said, it has a huge cultural heritage value. It also has an economic value, and we're very fond of our mortgages in the UK on ownership. And it also has a carbon sequestration value. There is a lot of embodied carbon in our building, which we should acknowledge and retain. So what can we do? Well, there's we need to look at retrofits in the context of a regenerative design and have a, you know, a comprehensive view of what the climate challenges are, climate change challenges are for us. So it's embodied carbon, it's building fabric, it's comforts, a lot of things. We need to prioritize occupants' comfort and health, especially in times of COVID. That becomes even more important. Future-proof residential stock against fuel poverty. I didn't mention, but the previous map on the previous slide, if I just go back, is the areas where the people suffer the most of fuel poverty when you have to basically choose between eating and heating yourself. So it's a really widespread issue in the UK, which we need to really address at the same time as climate change through our building comfort. How much you know, how fast do we need to do this? I like this graph on the right-hand side because it really shows us that we need to put a huge effort for a very short time, and then a problem will be solved forever, pretty much. But we have to do, you know, I can't remember exactly the figure, but it's ridiculous. It's something like 50,000 building an hour or something like that. So it's really, really quite important. And the task is absolutely perhaps daunting, but it's to the importance of the reasons. One thing that I wanted to stress also, as Hattie's mentioned, I've been working on this topic for about a bit more than 10 years now, and the examples have been there for more than 10 years. And what's happened in the last 10 years? Not very much. So I think this is the wake-up call. Hopefully in the last year, obviously, climate change has risen to the fore of the attention of a lot of people. So hopefully we're going to get on that curve. So why do we need to get on that curve? Is because in the 19th century, we just needed warm clothes and wood and you know, fireplaces. In the 20th century, we we emitted carbon neutral, sorry, in 19th century. So we were carbon neutral, more or less. In 20th century, we chuck a lot of system at it, or the central heating system, etc. But we used fossil fuel. So now we need to go back into being more clever in making our building more efficient in fabric and using only renewable energy systems. So how do we start? I know it's been daunting, and I've put a really kind of difficult picture here for you, but the truth is that we can do it, and we know how to do it, and it can absolutely be done. So we need to absolutely tackle that portion of heating and reduce it absolutely drastically, and that's mostly through trying to avoid having a boiler or minimizing its use by increasing the performance of your building fabric. That is #1 priority. And obviously when you insulate, you ventilate. I'm going to go back on this. You have to retrain. It's really, really important. You're not going to go back to your desk tomorrow morning and have learned everything about net zero carbon in a 10-minute chat. So I've put here retrofit coordinator course, passive house trust, BRE, the Green Register, ACB, Stroma. All of them are providing courses to teach people how to do net zero carbon, and in particular retrofits. So get on a course and you'll be absolutely fine. It's quite fun. We've done it in the office. Instead of sending one person here or there, I actually brought the trainers in the practice, and we trained 15 people at once. It's a very efficient way of doing it. So in practice, so as Hattie mentioned, I do a single Victorian passive houses, but I also do this sort of project, which is about 120 million Nash grade 1 listed facade, which despite the appearance was bombed in the Second World War, rebuilt in concrete, and then we took it on and it was in poor condition. So we re-demolished it and rebuilt it to identical. So this is a brand new building, grade 1 listed. So this is, I've put it into the reinvention of buildings, but in effect, and this is what it used to look like. In effect, this is a sort of new building, but yeah, rebuild with partly old techniques. In this picture, you will see 2 blocks sticking out of the curve. These are actually existing, retained. We haven't touched these. They've been there since the 1960s. So sometimes what you see is not really what you think is new, is not exactly what it might be. So you have to really understand the complexity of what you're looking at and the history. But we retrofitted these blocks as well, part of the project. And this is the kind of new build retrofit-like details. And I thought it would be interesting for you to understand how it works, which is basically a solid wall construction with a new in yellow insulated layer. So it's a sort of retrofit, grade 1 brand new building. And that we definitely have had many challenges here because we're also part L 2013 and BREEAM Excellence. So it's I don't think you could make it more complicated.
Marion, I want to keep some time for questions. I forgot to put the timer on. Are you almost done?
I'm going to go very quickly. This
okay.
is another big project, which is on Oxford Street, which is House of Fraser, and we are repurposing. So at the moment, COVID poses a lot of challenge for retail, and this is about a repurposing of a building. So you can see that the mix, well, before everything would have been retail in light pink in this diagram, now it's going to be more office, gym, restaurant, multi-purpose. So we're seeing an enormous change in the actual uses of buildings.
That's really incredible.
Yeah, so that's the future of Oxford Street, possibly.
Who's the client? Who owns it? Can you say?
Sort of private individual property owners who owns a few things in London. All are obsessed with Art Deco, a trained architect. Very interesting. I'm going to skip through the fabric, but obviously reworking the meaning of the original design meant that the glass was obscured. It was lingerie shop and they didn't want people to see in, but they wanted the quality of light. Now the purpose is different. We want the light in, etc. So we have to remodel the facades also. This is about pushing the boundaries, about remaking a new building within an existing building. So this is a Princedale Road project which has been certified to Passive House, and it's about applying the 5 key principles of Passive House, which is insulation, triple glazing, ventilation, airtightness, and thermal bridges. So this is basically the intention here was to re-insulate the entire building from the inside. So we practically gutted the house and rebuild a house inside, and what you see is actually sort of a cladding. But that works, and it absolutely maintains the appearance from the outside, the value of the cultural heritage. There is new technology helping us to do passive house in conservation area, like for example, filio glass, equivalent to triple glazing, but only 8 mil thick. Ventilation system, absolutely mandatory to do net zero carbon strategies or zero carbon, as is airtightness, and you're going to become in the future years the absolutely kings and queens of the airtightness catalog. I can tell you that. How do we know that it works? We need to monitor, absolutely 2 years minimum, and you can see in these graph on the left-hand side the effect of the MVHR starting in a retrofit, where you see the CO2 concentration really dropping significantly, proving that, you know, the whole system has worked. And the temperature on the right-hand side stay very stable no matter what the temperature is.
Marion, we got to wrap it up because we only got 10 minutes left.
So this is just to show that, you know, 20 case studies have achieved 70% carbon reduction. We can do it. So there is many barriers to retrofit, and this is my last slide. I just wanted to say that retrofits and zero carbon in existing building is absolutely possible. There's many examples. There is a lot of training available. If we balance the cost against other saving like NHS, etc., the value of its benefits to society as a whole would, we would realize it isn't much after all. So the combination of climate change and COVID-19 confinement and work from home make it more urgent than ever to make retrofit happen. Thank you very much.
That was very inspirational. 4 fantastic talks from very, very different points of view. Thank you. I want to know, was that your daughter who's training up to?
It wasn't a picture of my daughter, but yeah, she could well be.
Right. Okay. Now, there are a couple of, I'd like to take some questions from the audience. If you want to put your questions in the Q&A, I've only got a couple here at the moment. And Sumita, are you still on the call? Sumita? No. Well, she's got a good question about POE, which you also raised, Marion. She's proposing that all buildings up for awards should have been in use for at least 2 years and its energy use audited before being able to be submitted for industry awards. I think so far SIBSI is the only one that has, and the Passive House Trust, that have tackled that. Kavita, would you like to comment on this? Or Marion, whoever would like to comment?
I mean, I agree. I think that's a great idea to have some level of post-occupancy monitoring. A minimum of 1 year would be good. And then additionally will be a bonus.
Yeah, I mean, just to add, I think one of the main issue is that client, I mean, despite also not wanting to pay for it, find revealing the results
absolutely
of confidentiality issues, and they're very reticent to publish their findings.
Yeah, it's so far in my experience, it's mostly the higher ed sector, or, you know, places like WWF who are really the exemplars leading the way, who are willing to do this. And we just need to make it more mainstream. But we have a long way to go.
I think there's another issue in the fact that a lot of developments are sold on. So
yes,
you've got this whole issue of the developer not actually owning the building. You also are building a building for tenants. Obviously, if it's commercial property, obviously residential is very different. But if you have a series of tenants who don't buy into the green agenda, we still don't have this fundamental principle of a green lease or equivalent in this country. It's still an MOU. And a lot of companies are, you know, through the planning system required to meet the WELL agenda or BREEAM or the Australian systems. So it is a bit of a minefield, and usually is driven by the developer wanting to try and lease the building out with certain requirements, but doesn't necessarily always retain the ownership going forward. So that's kind of why.
Do you see any change happening in the work you're doing, in the mindsets about this? Or would you say it's still business as usual?
No, it's very much changing. You can't, the competitive nature of the commercial office buyer, the person who wants to rent new space, is very much looking at this sort of thing, especially with the COVID situation. Engineering wise, Kavita will well know that there are people who are looking at buildings at 3 or 4 years from now who are saying, well, how are you going to COVID proof it? There is no such thing as a COVID proof building because we don't know what it's going to transform into. But it's all about making sure the tenants, whether it's a 20-story skyscraper or whether it's a small building that I talked to you about for Bart's Close, where you can open your own windows. Things like fresh air and that kind of thing, these are the questions we're being asked now for buildings that won't complete in 2023 to 25, because obviously we're working on long-term jobs at the moment. So ultimately the developer doesn't always own and retain the ownership of the property. So there's sometimes is that attitude of ticking a box and paying, you know, getting the things done, but having a 2-year program of monitoring it afterwards is probably unlikely for some developers. Not all, but some.
Probably most still. So what about, I mean, in the UK's more temperate climate, these things of, you know, moving back away from sealed buildings towards openable buildings are perhaps more feasible, but you've been working a lot in the Middle East. How do you see that? Or Kavita, I think you've been working on projects also in Singapore and other places. Or, you know, I'm American, the humidity on the East Coast in cities like Boston and New York make this whole thing of no air conditioning, you know, not very realistic. So how do you see this evolving?
I finished working in the Middle East in 2009, I think. And at the time, there was very much lived service. They were following either the American or the UK guidelines, because most of the construction firms were from that, the people that were working on these projects were from that pool of engineers and resources and with that experience. I think Abu Dhabi was much more, I worked in Dubai and Abu Dhabi. Abu Dhabi was very much more eco-friendly. They had an ethos to be more sustainable from the outset. But I think Kavita probably has better and more recent experience than I do.
Mm-hmm. I think both regions, both in Asia as well as Europe and the Middle East, they're all evolving quite quickly. They're looking to the West to provide that guidance. And also in terms of sustainability and engineering, embedding this within corporate responsibilities or also in terms of the planning requirements has helped drive this challenges or these activities, I think what you find is as the bigger companies or the bigger global organizations drive this forward within what they're doing, you find that the lower down the hierarchy are also wanting to keep up, and they are willing to change. So it's just driving the message and keep pushing the agenda forward.
Right. Now, here's a question on the chat for Marion from Claudia Kesher. What should the government do to drive retrofitting existing stock?
Great question. Thank you very much. Absolutely first measure is to slash the VAT rate.
Yeah, absolutely. That's part of the Retro First campaign. Absolutely essential.
100%, and it's really not an incentive for people to embark in projects, especially on domestic projects, because while commercial clients might be able to afford large VAT, you and I is a bit difficult. So, you know, you're starting from 20% up from new build. So it's not very encouraging. Then we need to absolutely train the nation with builders, engineer, retrofit coordinators. We're not going to achieve it if no one knows how to do it. So we need to have an army of builders and people who actually can actually build these retrofits. A lot of my friends come to my house, and as Hattie said, I have done my own retrofits, which even with a broken boiler is still at 20.5 degrees for the last 4 days, which is incredible. And yeah, some friends ask me, you know, where should I go? Who can build it for me? And I can't recommend them many people because there just isn't enough builders who know what an airtightness tape look like.
Yeah.
So we need to train.
We're almost on 7:30. I want to come back to Harriet with one more question that's on the chat, which is related to one that I had. It's about your reuse of the cladding stone. So this is a question from Hélène Salou-Laborde. Brilliant reuse of the cladding stone. How did you go about assessing and testing its suitability for paving, such as slip resistance and loading capacity? And my question is it more expensive to go through that exercise than to just get something new? And how did you convince the client to do it?
Well, we did convince the client, and then the client changed their mind. So unfortunately, we went through a period of testing it for the requirements, and then the client changed their mind. So it wasn't actually reused. We went through a lot of hoops in order to start doing it, and it was then they then substituted it for granite.
Yeah. Is that because of cost or?
It was cost.
Yeah, this is the
and
thing.
logistics. It was a very, very tight site. So taking it down.
Yeah, and you need a place to store stuff.
And storing it and then bringing it back 4 years later was also a logistical nightmare. So,
yeah.
But we will do it one day.
Mm-hmm. Well, we have to keep pushing.
Yeah, exactly.
Can I squeeze in one more question? I wanted to come back to Kavita on the prop tech. Do you think that can solve some of these problems? Or is that just going to make more things that don't get commissioned properly and don't work properly and don't really solve the problem?
I think in terms of using prop tech, again, is understanding what data you're getting out of it so that you be able to mitigate or use that data for use. And coming back to the same thing we talked about earlier in terms of post-occupancy evaluations for awards, you know, again, you know, how much of that data is good quality data. So understanding the data is the first point there. But once you understand that and you see how that works within, you know, your building, that will help enhance or improve on some of the challenges you're facing current day.
Great. Well, I think our time is up. I wish we could adopt something that ACAN does at their meetings. They invite everyone into a virtual pub on a different Zoom call after their meetings. They say, everyone go get a drink and come back, and then they carry on the conversation and go into breakout rooms so people can meet each other. I would like to thank NAWIC and just say that it's really great to see this type of cross-industry discussion. We just need more of this. We really need more of this. And a huge thank you to Diana for putting this panel together with a really interesting array of perspectives and experiences, very, very thoughtfully put together. And you know, it's such an important topic, I think.
And thank you, Hattie, and to all the speakers for giving us so much food for thought tonight. And the recording of tonight's discussion will be on the NAWIC website and our YouTube channel.
Will you be posting the presentations as well?
I think it will be just a recording, I guess, but we can have this discussion, yeah, separately. Yeah.
Right. I guess the presentations are included in the recording.
Yeah,
so
obviously.
That's it. Yeah. Good.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Thank you. Bye.
Nice to meet you all.
Bye.